Coming to paperback and e-readers in 2021, John Haynes, Taking Care of Business. The man who rules the world breaks on a brand new partner to help him take care of business in this action-packed all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get John Haynes, Taking Care of Business in 2021 at online booksellers everywhere.
I was watching Go-Go 13, The Professional, on Tubi on New Year's Day, and as I was watching Go-Go 13, The Professional, and Your Ghost in the Shell, it really made me shake my head about the sad state of hand-drawn animation here in America. Now, your hand-drawn animated films have not been something American filmmakers and American movie studios have wanted to make these days. Most companies now want to do everything through computer-generated animation because they believe it is cheaper. And most American companies, they, as I see it, have not really even tried to take hand-drawn animation to the next level ever since they got burnt at the box office on several attempts to take hand-drawn animation to the next level with films such as your Titan AE, your Treasure Planet, and films like your Iron Giant. These films, while they were very innovative in their designs, just did not catch on with the audiences here in America. And I believe one of the reasons why they didn't catch on with audiences here in America is because most of Americans have this perception about hand-drawn animated media that it's mostly a form of media meant for children. Now, in America, that has always been the perception as related to animation ever since Walt Disney was one of the innovators of the medium back in the 20s and the 30s. Most people saw animation as something only meant for children. However, in Japan, they don't have this idea about hand-drawn animation, and because they don't have these ideas about hand-drawn animation, they go out here and can tell stories in different genres of stories, such as dramas, such as comedies, such as action and adventure, such as cyberpunk, and such as tech noir. They can go out here and tell a variety of stories using hand-drawn animation, and they usually understand that story is paramount to selling an animated series. Now, in America, they don't have that perception, and that's why we have really struggled over the years to really get hand-drawn animation taken to the next level. Now, I remember when Disney was trying to take hand-drawn animation to another level during the Don Bluth years of the late 1960s and 1970s with films like Robin Hood, films like The Rescuers, which had darker tones and more adult themes. Unfortunately, that didn't really help Disney's bottom line that well, and when they tried to do something that was a little bit more edgy with Black Cauldron, Disney wound up with one of its biggest flops of all time. Now, there were other efforts made to try to make edgier animated films, and I remember when I was a kid, there was a film called The Secret of NIMH. Now, The Secret of NIMH was a major real turn for American animation. It was one of the first films made by a big studio that featured darker themes, more adult themes, and a darker tone. And sadly, like Black Cauldron, it wound up failing at the box office as well due to people's perceptions regarding hand-drawn animation here in America. Now, these perceptions were one of the things that led to your hand-drawn animation having major struggles throughout the 80s. I mean, I even remember Filmation taking huge risks with the series Brave Star. And at 14 years old, I thought that was one of the most fascinating animated series I had ever seen. I mean, I remember Filmation making things like He-Man and She-Ra and Filmation's Ghostbusters and doing those type of comical type series. But what happened with Brave Star is, again, it didn't catch on because of American perceptions about hand-drawn animation. Unfortunately, we had a lot of, again, negative perceptions of taking all types of risks, but when hand-drawn animation started to revive its renaissance with Little Mermaid, we started to see other studios like Warner Brothers taking some risks. And one of the most riskiest and innovative animated series I have ever seen is Paul Dini and Bruce Timm's Batman the Animated Series here in America. And this was a groundbreaking series as related to hand-drawn animation because, like its 80s predecessors, Brave Star, Secret of Nim, and Black Cauldron, your Batman the Animated Series finally gave us an animated series with darker themes, darker tone, and gave us some very compelling storytelling with a bit of an edge. And with the success of Batman the Animated Series and the start of Disney's Renaissance, we started to see television and movie studios finally starting to take more risks with hand-drawn animated projects. Oh, don't let me forget The Simpsons, which also was a major risk. I mean, that was almost like The Flintstones, because The Flintstones was an adult television series when it came out and then was syndicated for children. But The Simpsons also had a contribution in that. But The Simpsons, Little Mermaid, and Batman they led to studios taking more risks with hand-drawn animated projects. And then we had Disney's Gargoyles, which was also another groundbreaking series because, like Batman the Animated Series, it also took a lot more risks because here was a Disney series that featured which featured two black actors in the lead roles, Keith David, who was Goliath, and Sally Richardson, who was Elisa Maza. That was the first time we ever saw two black actors in a lead as related to Disney voiceovers. And we also saw more compelling stories, and we saw, again, that darker, more edgy theme. And we also saw them exploring things and going with a bit more of a harder edge than American animation has ever taken so far. So that was them taking more risk. And as we saw Disney benefiting from those risks, and we saw Warner Brothers taking risks, we also saw Fox step into the game with Anastasia. And Anastasia was also, again, another innovative film because it took risks as well, as related to its visuals and as related to its storytelling, as related to a hand-drawn animated film. And it was like a golden age with these animated films, and we started to see more and more studios step in. And one of the great innovators we saw later on, as related to taking risks, we saw with Mulan, which instead of being a musical film, gave us a more drama-type Disney film, and Tarzan, which also gave us a more drama-type film, instead of just giving us musical singing cups and animals and stuff. It gave us multidimensional characters and multidimensional stories. So we were starting to see American animation finally start taking steps to be on the same level as its Japanese counterparts, even though they were still like a couple of years behind because films like Ghost in the Shell were taking things to another level. But Americans were starting to build some momentum as related to the hand-drawn animated projects they were making in the 90s, and they were finally starting to take more of the risks that their Japanese anime counterparts had already been taking back in the 80s with stuff like Go-Go 13 and many of the other projects they had made back in the 70s. So we started to see a lot more risks as related to storytelling, and we started to see a lot more effort put into characters and put into doing different kinds of stories. And Warner Brothers came out with a very innovative film that most people really don't appreciate, and that was The Iron Giant, and that was a fantastic film. But again, because many Americans have these perceptions about animation, they didn't really appreciate how great that film was. So we started to see studios really starting to take risks with their films, and by the early 2000s, a lot of studios, because they were starting to see some benefits from many of the earlier films that they did, like your Mulans and your Tarzans, and things like Batman animated, Superman animated, Gargoyles, all these things having success, they started feeling like they could take risks and explore different genres. Unfortunately, what happened with American hand-drawn animation was there were a series of box office failures in the early 2000s that really hit hard. First was The Iron Giant, then there was Titan, AE, then there was Atlantis, The Lost Empire, then there was Treasure Planet, and all of those films, while they were taking very creative risks, the story just did not catch on. And I believe in some ways a big problem with those films was Disney was still trying to market them as children's films instead of trying to sell them to an older and adult crowd. Now, there was an adult crowd out there and an older crowd looking for edgier material, and that was shown to me with 1999's Batman Beyond. Now, Batman Beyond also was a major, innovative, hand-drawn animated project, and this one, again, had harder adult themes and a edgier story, but Warner Brothers wanted to try to sell this to kids, even though teens were sitting there watching Batman Beyond, and by that third episode, Meltdown, the audience was mostly teenagers, and they wanted to see more of Terry's story, but Warner Brothers wanted to sell it to kids, and that was one of the big problems with a lot of these studio executives was they had this perception, again, animation was for children, and they were still trying to, again, go with these edgier types characters, but they were still trying to sell Happy Meals, and that really was not something that gelled because these edgier type characters, you can't merchandise them with Happy Meals and princess dolls. That's one of the reasons why a lot of the studios they got upset because they couldn't really market and merchandise the way that people in Japan do, because in Japan they do it all ages. So when they do collectibles for kids, and they also do collectibles for adults. But that market hadn't really emerged just yet here in America. And what happened was these films wound up failing because they tried to, again, market them to children, and they tried to sell them to kids. And the whole thing was these films, they were taking risks. They were very innovative, and they told somewhat compelling stories, but there was nothing really there that really picked things up as related to being something that they could market and sell. And that was one of the reasons why Batman Beyond got canceled in 2004 was, not 2004, 2000, I think 2001 or 2002. Static Shock got canceled in 2004. But they got canceled because the studio said it was selling more to teens, not understanding that that's the audience you would want for this for anyway, because teens are a big market, and the whole thing is you want to keep animation moving in a direction where you can reach a larger audience. Again, a lot of these studio executives, they were thinking short term as related to kids and Disney princesses, but they were not thinking about taking the medium to the next level and reaching a larger audience. So that's one of the reasons why hand-drawn animation struggled with the studios, and I was deeply saddened when I started to see the studios no longer making hand-drawn animated films, because as a kid who grew up with hand-drawn animation ever since the late 70s, I saw where it was going, and I saw where the art form was on going, and I thought it was going to go and take itself to the next level. Unfortunately, many American companies, they are just too afraid to take risks. And I know from Chris Crazy House how he talks about how they really didn't want to invest in American animation. And I know that they take a lot of animation overseas, but they missed out on an opportunity to really elevate the art form of hand-drawn animation. And we started to see, after this decline of Disney's golden age and the fall of the closing of the Warner Brothers animated division and the Fox animated division, I believe, because after Titan AE, they really just shut everything down, and hand-drawn animation practically died here in America, and the nail was finally put in Disney's hand-drawn animated division with the failure of The Princess and the Frog. So instead of them focusing on hand-drawn animation, they decided to focus on digital animation. And it's really sad because I believe that we haven't really even scratched the surface as related to where hand-drawn animation could really go. Because when I look at recent films from Japan, they have really continued to take hand-drawn animation to the next level. And that's because they don't see it as a medium for selling products. They don't see it as a medium for going out here and selling Happy Meals. They don't see it as a medium for creating something just for children. No, when it comes down to our Japanese counterparts here in America, they see animation as an art form, and while they may make cheap animated series to sell toys like Pokemon, they also make great animated films, and they explore stories in different genres. And because they go out here and again see it as an art form, and they explore stories in different genres, and they go out here, they can make masterpieces like your Go-Go 13, which was very innovative for its time because it was one of the first animated films I've ever seen that featured adult themes, adult content, and really a storyline that was just downright compelling. Or Ghost in the Shell, which really had one of the very most compelling stories I've ever seen. I mean, that is just a fantastic film, and if we made films like that with hand-drawn animation, it would take American animation to the next level. And I know it's possible to take American animation to that next level, but the big problem here in America is we really have to change our perceptions about hand-drawn animation, because I never saw hand-drawn animation as just something for kids. Even when I was 6, 7 years old, I never saw it as something just for kids. I always saw hand-drawn animation as an art form, and even as a kid, I would say, why can't somebody make a drama that features hand-drawn animation? Why can't somebody tell a story featuring hand-drawn animation? And why can't we have these kind of stories here in America? Because I know that it's possible to tell those kind of stories based on what I've seen with Batman Mask of the Phantasm. I mean, that's just a fantastic hand-drawn animated movie. It's a masterpiece as I see it. I mean, many people say it's the best Batman film ever made. And when I look at that film and I just see where they just took things from an animator's perspective, I mean, that is a masterpiece when you really think about it. And when I think about other animated films that really, took a lot of risks, I mean, this art form has, again, in America, has never really scratched the surface. And many people, they're just at the movie studios are afraid of taking risks with it. Many of these movie executives, they're afraid to take risks because they're afraid they can't market it. But I believe with the right story, you could make a hand-drawn animated movie that's a drama, that features adult themes, that features even adult situations, and American audiences would go out here and buy it because, well, there's an audience for it. Because when I think about the success of Batman Beyond, the success of Gargoyles, the success of Batman the Animated Series, I know that it's possible to do something with hand-drawn animation. And when I think about the sad state of hand-drawn animation right now, when I think about this Steven Universe, Thundercats Roar era, it just makes me shake my head because I remember when American movie studios were taking these huge risks and they were giving us some absolutely fantastic hand-drawn animated films and hand-drawn animated TV series like Batman Beyond, Gargoyles, and Batman the Animated Series. And I think about the kind of storytelling they were presenting there, and it just shakes my head when I think about what we've got now calling itself animation, because what we have calling itself animation right now is a major disappointment. Because if you look at what hand-drawn animation used to be, hand-drawn animation really, it was something spectacular to look at. I mean, if you go out here and you look at, again, those hand-drawn animated series like Batman Animated, Batman Beyond, and you see the artistry that was presented in those, and you look at when Disney was taking risks with things like Tarzan and taking risks with movies like Mulan. It just shows you that they took it to another level and they learned their mistakes from failures like Black Cauldron and failures like Secret of NIMH, which were very good films, but just that the audience, again, their perception of animation at that time was the problem. In the 90s, people had the starting to come out of it, and then in the 2000s, we started to see people fall back, and sadly, it set back American hand-drawn animation. But I'd like to see this art form, finally make another revival, and I wish it would make another revival, because I believe we have not really taken it to the next level here in America, and I believe all it takes is the right filmmaker and the right story to really get people thinking about hand-drawn animation, because I'm really tired of seeing goofy digital computer animation that's half done. I really want to see us get back to what hand-drawn animation used to be, because I believe we really have not taken this art form to the level it should be here in America. Because when I look at what they're doing with hand-drawn animation in Japan, it just blows my mind. And I know that if, with the right story, the hand-drawn animation here in America could blow people's minds in the exact same way. If you'd like to try some of my positive African-American fantasy fiction, like the Isis series, the E-Steam series, the John Haynes series, and the books of the Spinsterella trilogy, you can find all of those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find some of them on Smashwords, Barnes & Noble, the iBookstore, and Google Play. And if you want to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.
Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, E-Steam: The Sands of Time. It's action and adventure in ancient Egypt in this terrific teen time travel romance. Get your copy of E-Steam: The Sands of Time at your favorite online bookseller today.